What's going on, U-Turn friends? You know that I like to bring you very unique and special people that I just find throughout life. And I could not help but bring Omani Carson onto the show. An incredibly special person. Some people call him Ron. And he is somebody who is a founder and a chairman of Carson Group. It's a leading financial services company, and it served financial advisors and investors through its free businesses, through its three businesses, Carson Wealth, Carson Coaching, and Carson Partners. I'll have to edit that properly. All three organizations are headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska, but they serve a really broad base of advisors and investors across the United States. He's also a New York Times bestselling author, one of the only two advisors ever inducted into the inaugural Barron's Hall of Fame, an award-winning entrepreneur, dynamic keynote speaker, passionate philanthropist. And he has a lot of, obviously principled discipline as a CEO. So Ron, or as I like to call him, Omani, he's established Carson Group to be among Barron's top 100 RIA firms in the country, managing $34 billion in assets, serving 50,000 families. And I think what's most inspiring for me to talk to you about here, and for all of you to learn from, is not just his journey, but there was just some inflection points for him that he changed his mindset. And I think all of us are striving for success. There's the goal line and then there's the soul line, right? And all of you have heard me talk about that. And I don't know, when I look at my 20s, it's like I was focused on trying to be someone. And now in my 30s, I'm just trying to be of service. I'm still wanting to have a family, build my finances out right. So we're still playing on the goal line, right? But it's very real to want to take care of your soul and to not lose yourself along the way. So Omani has some really powerful practices that he can share with you around that. So without further ado, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh my gosh, Ashley, thank you for having me. And I love that. I'm always big on creative ways to say something, and I love the soul line.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's
Yeah.
powerful.
And I love that we have your grandson here. Hello.
Can you wave? He's 6 years old, and he's going to have a lot different life because of the work that myself, his mother, father, grandma, and aunts and uncles are doing. And that's maybe a good spot to jump in here, Ashley. I was born in Lima, Ohio, moved to Nebraska when I was 9. And we're a farming family. My partner, Jeannie, 42 years. She also grew up on a farm. And I want to explain the Ron Omani because in a way it explains, how I got to where I'm at today. So when I was 17, my parents went broke farming. And you're too young to remember this because you weren't born yet, but interest rates are 21.5%. And pretty much everybody went broke. And it was one and only time I'd ever seen my father cry. And it seared my soul. And especially being in a smaller farm community, it was really embarrassing for me. Remember how your parents used to embarrass you, unintentionally, but this was major embarrassment. And I vowed to myself I would never be poor. And I'd never have that feeling again. And the only kind of, poor versus wealthy I knew was materialistic. My parents were atheists. They had no spiritual belief, so my sister and I really didn't have one. And so I started my business out of my college dorm room when I was 18 at the University of Nebraska, literally cold calling out of a phone book. I had no money. My parents had no money. But what I did have was this inferno burning in my gut, this burning desire to not experience, financial failure and pain, as I just witnessed with my father. And it scared me. And so I worked hard. I mean, really hard up until about the age of 50. And not that I don't work hard today, but it was unhealthy hard. When I tell you I'd be to work by 4:30 in the morning and I get home at 8:30 at night. And I did that 5 days a week. On Saturdays, I would work until 5 or 6 at night. And then Sundays I'd work a half a day. And that was my pattern. And I wasn't even available to be a good partner. I wasn't available to be a good father because I was mentally and physically spent all the time. And I remember telling myself, if I had, $10,000 of money saved, I wouldn't feel this way. And I remember having the 10 and I felt the same way. And I thought, well, maybe it needs to be a million and then a 10 million. And then I realized it didn't matter, that this was a mirage. It was that proverbial, put pot of gold under the rainbow. You can never find it. It never is going to give you that feeling. And then my mom passed away about 9 years ago. I'll turn 60 here in August. And I went, not only was I not happy, but I was operating under fear and scarcity, not loving my life. Although everybody looking from the outside in, I had this successful business. I had a lot of material things. They thought I was having a great life. And I felt like a fraud, because the secret was I was teaching people how to be better advisors and better humans through our coaching program, which gives me great pride to say it was successful. I could tell people how to do it, but I couldn't get my own mind in the right mindset, even though I could help other people get there. I wasn't walking my talk as it related to mindset. And when my mom passed, I had a codependent relationship with her. She was up and down our whole life. She was manic depressive. My dad was and still is an alcoholic. And but Jeannie and I separated during that time. And I really was on this, like, I need to find myself. I need to find some joy and happiness in my life. And I went out to Venice, California. I did a week-long intensive therapy with a gentleman by the name of Karosh, who to this day, I call him my cosmic father. He's one of my closest friends. And at the end of this week-long counseling, I felt like I had the tools, because I'd done talk therapy in the past, and it really didn't dent me anywhere. It didn't have any kind of impact. And as I was ending, I was a Friday afternoon having my final session with Karosh. I gave him a big hug and I said, I feel like I've really got the tools and the way of knowing I'm going to be okay and finding some joy in my life. And part of my agreement with Karosh too, by the way, Ashley, was that I needed completely unplug for that week. So I had a lot of time to read things, and I started learning about psychedelic therapy. And as I was leaving Karosh's office, I give him this hug and I go, oh, by the way, I've been reading a lot about psychedelic therapy, and do you think I'd be a candidate of it? And I fully expected him to say no. Otherwise, it would have come up during the week. And he said, absolutely. And I'm thinking, well, where the hell has this been all week? Why am I asking you about it, kind of as a parting question as I'm getting ready to walk out of your office? And he said, the medicine will call you when it's ready for you. And so he hooked me up with a doctor at Topanga Canyon, which is basically LA. And 6 months later, and up to this point, the only thing I had done was, drinking. I drank a lot of alcohol, beer, wine, pretty much anything alcohol related. I was a heavy drinker, but I didn't consider that a drug. And I was like, well, I don't know about doing these illegal drugs. And after having a few sessions with this doctor, he said, I can tell you, you're a great candidate. I think this will have a profound impact on your life. So I went through and I did a journey. It lasted about 10 hours in Topanga Canyon. And it was the first time ever that I knew my spirituality was born on that day. And really in 2016. And it was like, wow, there's something else out there. And since I've continued to do psychedelic therapy, going deep into a journey state, and I went from having none to I have no question about or God. And I'm not here to get religious, but for me, it gave me this amazing spirituality. And it also allowed me to shift my operating system from fear and scarcity to love and abundance. And having done this work, it's like, I need to bring this to other people suffering from what I'm suffering from. And by the way, Ashley, I can spot one of the old me a mile away. And when you hear the name Ron or Omani, the name Ronnie, reminds me of my fear and scarcity years, because professionally, I'm still known as Ron Carson. But every time I hear the name Ron, that's what it brings up, those old patterns. And doing this work, I started working with the indigenous, fairly significant indigenous community. And for the work I did for them and with them, they inducted me into the Lakota tribe, which is a fairly large indigenous Native American tribe, and gave me my name, Tate Omani. and it means walking into a stiff wind. And so now Omani, which I prefer to go by, and everybody that meets me new only knows Omani, that represents the love and abundance operating system. So not only have I shifted my own operating system from fear and scarcity to love and abundance, but I'm also helping other individuals shift their operating system. And it's really been rewarding and very profound work for me.
Mm. That's beautiful. And I think a lot of people, their operating system is so strong, they don't even see it. And they have a lot of justifications, a lot of beliefs that keep them stuck in the same thing. I think about my partner who works his ass off. And he resonates with like influencers that are posting content about leaning into hard things. And I do think that success requires you to lean into hard things, but there's a tipping point where you're just like sacrificing yourself. How do you make those decisions? Like, how do you start to notice your own paradigm? I know psychedelics are so powerful. I've used them. I not extensively, but I've probably done like 4 or 5 journeys with mushrooms and had crazy, personal self-awareness. And what's amazing about it, it's like it's not like alcohol where you're drunk and then you have the next day. It's like you remember so much and you change. But I know there's people here that, might be open to psychedelics and there's some that aren't. How do we get them to start seeing their paradigm?
And let me take my dad as an example. I took
Yeah.
my dad and I had really challenged relationship. I had a lot of resentment that I held towards him. And he, and I think he just didn't show up in the way I feel like a father should have shown up for me. And so at the age of 81, I asked my dad, I said, would you consider doing one of these sessions with me? And he said, after a lot of going back and forth, he said, well, I will, but I'm not doing any drugs. And I said, well, okay, what's your definition of a drug? Because you do drugs every day when you drink your 6-pack of beer and your bottle of wine, and that's a drug. And it's funny, Ashley, I remember when first time someone told me alcohol was a drug, I'm like, don't do that. There's no way it could be a drug because it's legal. Everybody's allowed to do it. And alcohol is probably the most vicious, harmful drug on the planet, because as a society, we say it's okay. Everybody drinks all they want. And my sister gets involved with this because she went through a journey and it changed her life. And she said, Dad, give me a break. All you do is take drugs. You're not only the alcohol, but anything your doctor prescribes, you just blindly take. And we know how that turned out for people, with the Sackler family and, the opioid epidemic that we have. And that was all, FDA approved. I've never been a conspiracy theorist, Ashley, but I'm a big believer that big pharma really doesn't want these drugs out. They can't really compound them, or they can't patent them. So many of these compounds will eliminate SSRIs that you have to be on forever, or methadone treatment that you have to be on forever, and it has very low an effectiveness success rate. And so I do believe that we've just brainwashed our world into believing, hey, take this script, take it, without even understanding what the profit motive is behind that. And so as you talk about the awareness, it's changing. We fully expect, even though we had a minor setback, that MDMA therapy is going to be approved by the FDA on August 11th. I don't know when this actually runs, but the science is there. Stanford just did a study on iboga, which is a root that you consume, and it has a 97% success rate on curing heroin addicts. And then I talk about psychedelics in 2 forms. One, like if there's a heroin addict, they have to be able to cure themselves before they can play offense. They got to play defense before they can play offense. Yeah. But then if you're already doing pretty well, psychedelics can just take your life to a new level, a new awareness. You're connecting parts of your brain. Johns Hopkins University on their website has a really powerful side by side of a brain without psychedelics and a brain on psychedelics. Just shows how it's blown up, it's lit up. all of these connections, the synapses, are highly active and creating new neural pathways and increasing our neuroplasticity.
Mm, beautiful. Um, I don't know. I think a lot about what you're sharing and our capacity to change. And, you talked a little bit about your family and your challenging relationships. Like, I actually just started working with this new life coach, and I haven't had a life coach in forever. Like, I don't know. I just did so many years of self-development. I just kind of almost felt like I was overdeveloped, and the work was for me to develop more, but to accept what I am, like instead of being someone
Yeah.
else and striving. But I had this new life coach who has been really helping me. There's so much awareness I've had in my family structure of the pain I've had or the disconnects we've had. I have a great family, and with greatness comes pain sometimes, So I have some pains with them. And it's interesting. I didn't even realize till now at 37 years old that even though I've processed so many of the family dynamics I have that I suffer or have pain in, that I didn't realize how much I was taking on how other people see me in my family. And more than ever, I've realized that how people who you trust see you, how much those identities come into our brain because we are more receptive to the people we trust. And it's great to trust who we trust, but they influence how we see ourselves so deeply that it almost doesn't serve us sometimes.
Yes.
And so I
Yes.
just realized, I'm like, wow, my family thinks so many things about me. They think I'm a princess, but I'm not. I've just got high standards. I totally, it's not like I'm a princess waiting for somebody else to do it. I'm running my company. We've got 50 TEDx talks that we're writing and getting booked for people, nearly 100% success rate. It's because I'm working, like I'm doing the work. It's not like I'm a princess in a high rise waiting for people to do it. I think it's interesting. They see me as a princess over the years. They've told me that I have really sharp words because I'm really good at words. I realize now, well, I only have sharp words if you haven't heard me 5 or 6 times. Do you know what I mean? So that's actually quite reasonable to be terse after you've tried to communicate. So there's so many identities I've taken on and shame that I had about who they see me as. And it's not until recently that I've been like, I don't really want that anymore. And it's so wild to me that I'm 37. I've been sitting in therapy since I was 21. How am I just starting to realize how much I've believed what they said? I spent so much time looking at what it was and not looking at how I'm adopting it. And so, um, you're doing some really powerful work right now for people, and people need it. People have pain. How could anyone listening to this podcast perhaps start to implement a little slice of that work just from hearing you today? What are some things that you would recommend people do?
And I want to start with meditation. It's one of those things that is so simple and so soft, and everybody's heard of it. But when I first tried to meditate, Ashley, and there's all kinds of like empirical data out there now about what it does to the brain and how effective it is. But I couldn't get there. I need to be jolted to joy, because until I really felt what it was like to be in sync with my soul, uh, there was so much noise and so much clutter that I would try to meditate, and I couldn't wait for it to get over with. I mean, like, I'd be meditating for 2 minutes, and I swear it was 20 minutes. And I had 1,000 things that I was looping in my mind as soon as I was done meditating, because once you relax a little bit, a lot of things start to flow in because you've taken the pressure off.
Mm.
But I couldn't bring myself to do it very often because I didn't enjoy it. And having done and Joe Dispenza has some great meditations. I'm a big favor of, I use a theta brainwave that I just listen to with my noise canceling earphones. I put an eye mask on. I get super comfortable in a really nice, reclined either on a couch, cover up everything, and just try and cocoon into it. And there's times I'll meditate for an hour. I've meditated for up to 3 hours, and it flew by. And I use things like shift wave machine to help me. I've got a Rasha machine, which is a scalar energy machine made by Dr. Jerry. And there's lots of other ways to getting there. So the first thing I would tell anyone, take 10 minutes to meditate, like really try it, even start with 5 minutes. I did a transcendental meditation class when I really started doing this. And what really sold me, because I'm a results person, is the science that they had on what it does for the brain, what it does for the heart, what it does for longevity. So I was like, okay, I got to figure this out because I'm into biohacks. I want to live longer. I want to be more creative. I want to be happier. And meditation, I think, is a gateway to do that. If you never consider a psychedelic, meditation. The second is really uncomfortable breath work. You can have a true psychedelic experience with just breath work. I do this gathering at the ranch each year, and last October, by the way, can I plug that on your podcast? It's www.imagineor.com. And the whole idea behind the gathering is you can have the life we have, the world we have, or that's the Imagine, or we can have an alternative. And Finney and Kelly, who just came out with a new book called Intentionality. It was a #1 seller, I think, on Amazon last week. But he leads this breath work where we go and we breathe really uncomfortably for about an hour, and you swear you're going to die. And one thing I'll tell you about breath, even if you pass out, you'll start breathing again. And Finian, I never thought I could do this. The first couple of times I did it with him, we would hold our breath 4 times for up to 3 minutes. And the one we did at the gathering last year, we had 300 people in one area, and we had our last hold was almost 5 minutes. And people are like, you can't hold your breath for 5 minutes. No, you can't. Once, and he walks you through this process. But what it does is your brain releases DMT. And so when we're born, our brain releases DMT, and when we die, our brain releases DMT. And then there's things like Bufo or 5-MeO that can release that. You're putting DMT into your system, and this really intense breath work. You talk about changing your life. So if you just did meditation and you get into doing Finney and Kelly, you can go to Othership and download, some of his breathwork meditations. Really, really powerful. And there's the shift wave is another really easy way to get into that state, and it feels good because it's a chair. It vibrates. It relates nitric oxide into the system. Feels really good, and it can put you in that meditative state.
Okay, breath work is so interesting because, first of all, I think it's interesting talking about DMT in the brain, and if there's anything more you know about that, I find that super interesting. It's interesting. The only time I've ever been on medication for my mental health was during the pandemic. I was in a breakup 3 years with the same guy. Our parents are best friends, so it felt like earth shattering. They've been best friends since we were little babies. Broke up with him. I started hyperventilating, and I had to go on anxiety medication because the hyperventilation, it wasn't like a full-blown panic attack, but I just was low-grade panic attack, breathing all the time. And I think I was just processing, like, I have this huge German Shepherd. I just paid off all this debt. Which, side note, anybody paying off debt who's listening, like, who you are is not where you are. Because as soon as I paid off the debt, it was almost like my creativity freed up and I built a new company, and we had our first $1 million of revenue in 6 months.
Wow.
It's like we forget who we are. I was always that successful person that could create things, and anybody listening. But I don't know. I think a lot of people, for me at least, with mental health, like, I went on anti-anxiety medication. It did help. I stopped the hyperventilating. I needed it, or at least I thought I did. I got off of it. But now when I think about breath work, I'm like, man, I don't want to hyperventilate. I worked so hard to teach my body. I had to medicate to stop it. But I do know that it's powerful. And some of my friend Sam Skelly, she certifies breathwork coaches. She has hundreds of them going through her thing. My friend Ava, my friend Anna Nasri. I mean, they're all so committed to breathwork, and they all joke that I kind of hide from it. Can you tell us a little bit more just about breathwork in general, what your understanding is of it, why we should lean into it? Because I imagine for anybody who's come through a hard day's work, it's like 7 p.m. They're like, I don't want to hyperventilate for an hour in a room full of people, but the value's there.
It is. And I'm going to be the first to say, I don't think it's like I've hyperventilated, and it's not, if it has some of the same impact on the body because you're over oxygenating the body, but it doesn't put you in that same because I've hyperventilated before. It doesn't put you in that same state. What it does do is it resets your whole system. I mean, basically you're rebooting the system, and you're overcoming challenges that because we're always conditioned, if automatically we do something because we get a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's why Finian is such a master in this, is he will, at some point he will say, right now there's two kinds of people in the room. There are those that are getting ready to quit, and there are those that are going to make it through. And at the end of this, those that made it all the way through are going to, they didn't make it all the way through, are going to be so jealous when they hear the experience of those that did, honey. But it basically does a reset, and then it allows the brain to release DMT, because your body does think it's dying.
Yeah.
When you're holding your breath for that long, and that's why death is so beautiful. When I do Bufo, which is a DMT journey, this is where I went from having a spirituality to having total confidence on knowing that we go home and where we're at and what it feels like. And I don't need to subscribe to I don't need a salvation broker, to tell me how to get there. I was able to go there on my own. And I tell my wife, who's very into church and very religious, which I'm not in the religion thing, I'm in the spiritual thing. It's like, you won't find anybody any more spiritual than me, because I do not have a fear of death anymore. And I'm willing to push myself in order to have those kinds of experiences, because on a cellular level, once you have that, you'll never forget it. And back to my dad, he did end up saying yes to that. And he and I had the best dialogue we've ever had in our lives. And our relationship went from being like a 2 to an 8.
Wow.
Literally from one experience that we shared together.
Wow. Beautiful. How inspiring. And when we think about, I don't know, like the courage it takes to face these things, I think a lot of people are scared of the truth. I have a really good friend. She's in like a self-development thing right now. And she's doing this thing called the Truth Project, 30 days telling the truth. And if you don't tell the truth, you have to start over. So she's 90 days in, because she keeps noticing how these like little white lies slip in. And those of you who are into this topic, we had Lauren Zander on the podcast forever ago. Check out that episode about the lies we tell. But
would you send that to me, Ashley?
Yeah.
Is this one on the truth? This sounds fascinating. I would love.
She was really fire. Honestly, I think you'll find her really interesting, because I tried to actually have her back on, and her team got too big, and they were like, we can send a different coach on. And I was like, no, I want her. She's crazy. So I'll definitely send that to you. It's everything that's small, like I'm fine or I'm okay. But she caught a bunch of other lies that I don't really think much about. And it's so hard to tell the truth to yourself, to other people. And I think a lot of people avoid the work because they look at their marriage, they look at their house, they look at their dog, they look at their kids, and they're like, bullshit. If I start to tell the truth, this whole thing is about to get ruined, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I think people say they're fine, and sometimes they're not fine. And that's just people that are saying a word that hides it. But then a lot of people are fine. And I think self-development people sometimes don't make it okay to be okay. You know what I mean? How do we inspire somebody listening right now that, I mean, obviously they're growth driven enough to listen to me on the show, that with more than 400 episodes of growth. How do we start to get people to face it? And an even deeper question, because you're a business person, how do we start to get them to channel that honesty, that truth, that purpose into their career, where they can start to really choose what they want, set boundaries, choose a new path, whatever it may be?
I think it starts with self-love. I mean, we hear it all the time, and it's such a cliche, but it is so true. Unless you cannot be the person you were meant to be unless you really get to know yourself from the inside out and accept that. And here's an opportunity too, is do your own thinking and be curious. And you get to decide, be a creator and go into creator mode when you're doing the self-development from the inside out work, and decide, what do you want your ego to be? Because our ego keeps us alive. Our ego is a very necessary part of our life, but we allow sometimes our ego to override our soul. And through doing this work, when you can have your soul and your ego be congruent with one another, and they're not different. You don't need to have a psychedelic plant medicine experience in order to put that default mode network or DMN asleep, so you can really get to know your soul. Yeah. Once you've done this work, once you've tasted that, you can never forget it. You can never unsee it. You can never unfeel it. And then you're able to easily drop into meditation. You're able to do the breath work. And then once you have shifted your operating system from this fear and scarcity, because most of us operate that way, we're in a society that continues to promote that unconsciously. Once we're able to think for ourselves, we've created our ego from the inside out, we know who we want to be, and we're true to ourselves, we're true to our soul, then you can love and abundance and opportunity will show up for you 100-fold. I told you the story about me driving myself through fear and scarcity. Carson Group, the company, 9 years ago, was literally, 9 years ago, we would have been about a $3 billion company. So it took me 30 plus years to get to 3 billion.
What is this?
Once I made the shift from fear and scarcity to love and abundance, in the next 9 years, we're at just over 36 billion. Mm. So from 3 to 36, think of that. In 9 years, we had a tenfold, where it took all that energy and effort. And here's the other thing, Ashley. It's been infinitely more fun, infinitely more rewarding, because I'm approaching the life differently. I'm approaching myself and my psyche and my own creator mode differently. And that causes me to attract entirely different people into my life and unique opportunities.
Okay, I know a lot of people have careers that they don't really like. I love to hear that you've not only been able to like increase your impact through the revenues and the clients and the service, but you've also worked on yourself. I think some people, they feel like they're a prisoner in what they're doing. They're in the wrong place and they've got to do some serious work to get back into themselves. How do you recommend, I don't know, it's like the golden handcuff question, like too many people are like, I make too much to support my kids. I can't go pursue my dream to be this or that. How do you approach?
Here's a question I ask people is, you get to make the choice. You can either, like, first of all, how happy are you? And if someone is legitimately like, I'm somewhere between an 8 and a 10, like bad days I'm an 8 and good days I'm a 10, then I said, just keep doing what you're doing. But if your range is like, hey, sometimes I'm a 2 and sometimes I'm a 6,
yeah,
then you can either have the because if you don't make a change, if you're okay with the certainty of living a half life, because that's what that is, versus the uncertainty of getting out of your comfort zone and trying something new, what do you got to lose? Because it doesn't sound like you're loving your life today. And we lead retreats up at the ranch, and it's all about this, coming in and saying, if you're really truly happy and as happy and joyful as you can be, then just keep doing what you're doing. But if you feel like you're not the person you were meant to be, and there's another layer of joy and happiness that you want to experience, and going back to Maslow, all the way up to total transcendent, which is at absolutely the top of the pyramid, I'm going to argue that, your true life hasn't really begun yet, but you got to do the self-work. If you're just going to mail it in and you come up with a bunch of excuses as to why this isn't going to work, then you're right. I think JFK said, you think you can, you think you can't. Either case, you're right. Because the mind is way more powerful than anything. You have to decide internally that you're willing to go for it.
Yeah. This has been such a great conversation. Where do you recommend people go to, I don't know, experience more of your work, learn more from you? I mean, obviously you're a Renaissance man, which
this is self-serving, but I am launching a new business in October at our gathering up at the ranch. It's called Omya, OMYA. And this is not a for-profit endeavor for me. This is my life mission, but I want to leave something on this planet that's a regenerative transformation business. And follow me on LinkedIn. I put videos out, one video a week on different topics. A lot of it's around these kinds of items. LinkedIn won't let me have any more connections, but you can follow me on LinkedIn and get that. And I would say come to the gathering if you're really like this. And it's a melding pot. We'll have indigenous tribes there, and we'll have owners of it's a who's who, a melding pot of people from around the world, many that you will actually know and recognize. And it's really a way of immersing yourself in people that have been on this journey and totally transformed their lives. And some of them are billionaires. They were billionaires when they started it, but they weren't happy. And we have other people together who have nothing. The Seco Pai will be there. They're true hunter gatherers deep in the Amazon in Ecuador. But there's some of the wealthiest spiritual people you'll ever meet, because they truly are living their life between like a 9 and a 10 every day.
Mm. Mm. And how many people do you usually expect when you're doing these sorts of things?
We cap the events at 350. So there's still, I think, 20 or 30 spots left if any of your listeners want to come.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show. We'll put everything in the show notes, and I'm so
Thank
happy
you.
to be doing this the way that you are. It's very special. So hope everybody gets some inspo today, and until next week.